Do you actually have to be on cocaine to be on this podcast?
It's a great day to be a Wildcat!
Cocaine.
Surfing.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to yet another edition of Cocaine Willie. I am your commissioner, Bob Trollsby, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the good chef, Andre Napier. And Fireball Matt is out once again as he's moving down to the Lone Star State to join our friend Gerald down there in Texas. But our friend Allison Renner is filling in for him tonight. Allison, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for hopping on with us. Tonight, we are coming off of a 41-0 shellacking of the Houston Cougars, and we are 10,000% focused on a top 25 matchup between the number 7 Texas Longhorns and the number 25 Kansas State Wildcats, who are currently both tied for first in a 5-car pileup atop the Big 12 standings. To help us preview this matchup along with Allison, we have the host of the Longhorn Republic pod, Gerald Goodridge, who is on with us tonight. Gerald and Allison, both of you, how are you both doing today? And how are you feeling going into what might be the final matchup between K-State and Texas?
I am. I'm a pessimist. So I'm like terrified. The last 13 years of Texas football have probably done that to me. So maybe I'm just a realist, not a pessimist. But I'm excited. Honestly, I'm not excited to see this one go. I still have nightmares about Ron Prince. So like, I don't know if I'm like super sad to see this one go.
Man, yeah, I'm feeling a lot better this week than I was a couple weeks ago. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but Texas has always been one of those teams, man. So I hope this is the year we can finally do it and get the eternal scoreboard.
I would love that, considering my wife has had scoreboard on me since we've been in a relationship with each other, which started in 2017. And the last win against Texas came in 2016, if you all remember that one. But the season so far for Texas, by all means, it's been a great season, with the exception of the loss to a much improved Oklahoma team. If you're basing that off of how they performed last year with Venable's first year in Red River, Texas has really rolled through some good quality opponents, even when you look at that non-conference schedule, but especially when you look at the non-conference schedule in the win in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. And then in that Houston game, you did lose Quinn Ewers. He was knocked out of the game. He is out with a grade 2 AC joint sprain. But despite that loss in Red River, including that win in Alabama, what's the vibe check on the program through 8 games, including that landmark win, and a team that's sitting in that 5-way tie that we talked about atop the Big 12 standings?
It's safe to say the vibes are as good as they've been in a very long time. Like I was blessed enough to be like part of the overlap of like the end of the Vince Young era and the start of the Colt McCoy era on campus. And so like, I know what good vibes are in Austin, and this feels almost like that. Like I don't want to invoke that like fully, but fans are excited. I think fans feel like Texas has positioned itself well. 2 years ago we were like, is this Sark guy really going to be the one? And so I think seeing what he's done, having someone who came in with a very clear vision of what the team needed to be built like, and then he executed on that, and we're seeing the fruition of it really 2 years post 5-7. I think the vibes are really good. I think there's a lot of folks that maybe are a little bit too far over their skis on some of the things they're saying and expecting. But I think overall, fans are glad to be back, glad to be relevant. I say back like tongue in cheek, right? Because that's been the meme for forever. But Texas is 7-1. It's the best start since, Texas was competing for national championships. So I don't know what back means, but I think they're edging on to whatever that might be.
And if Texas is back, it's all relying on the quarterback. You had Quinn Ewers going into this season. Everything was hunky-dory. You lose to OU, but, that's a top 10 team at the time. But with Malik Murphy coming into the game, what is different? What is he doing differently than Quinn Ewers? And we saw the game versus BYU. It was solid. Yeah, what was it? What was his stat line? 16 to 25, 170, a touchdown, a weird interception, a very shaky interception. But what can we expect from Malik Murphy in his second career start versus K-State? And is it enough? Is it enough?
That's the $1,000,000 question. I think the difference between like Murphy and Ewers, I think really is like the difference between a redshirt freshman and a junior, right? Like I think some of the things that you saw Malik Murphy struggle with against BYU were things that it was his first start. Like he hasn't played a meaningful snap of football since his high school state championship game when he got injured. So like it's been a minute since he was a meaningful starter. And so I think you see those things that happen when players are used to being the most talented guy on the field, right? Where they probably throw a ball, that intercept, the fumble, this his second turnover. The fumble is one of those where like, kid, just eat it, just take it down. It's fine. Live to fight another day. Instead, he tries to do something, tries to make something happen, and things go sideways on him. So, a lot of that's processing, a lot of that's game speed. I think, Sark is a quarterback coach, and he's got his kind of understudy right-hand man waiting in the wings, as well as who's kind of playing quarterback coach now that Sark is the OC. And so I think Malik Murphy's got as big of an arm as you can want from anybody. He's Sark's prototypical. I can sling it any position on the field. His deep ball accuracy, honestly, is probably better than Quinn Ewers. But I think where Ewers excels that Murphy's struggling with right now is like the intermediate passes. Those the third and mediums, the third and six, you need to find your slot guy over the middle. The processing speed isn't quite there yet. So I think that's the big differentiator and the thing that you're going to want to look out for in this game. But if A.D. Mitchell is even with a cornerback in a single coverage, Malik's going to chunk it up, and it's going to be a good day for us all, or at least on this side of the webcam.
Also, I want to throw in there, I mean, if let's say it's worst case scenario, do we see Arch?
I mean, I don't know. He struggled. You mentioned it. He was three of his first six that threw an interception, and they went with him, and then he finished the game completed 13 and his final 18 passes for like 150 and 2 touchdowns. So I think Sark is willing to give him some ropes, give him some leeway. The plan all along has been for Arch to redshirt. Like that was part of the recruiting pitch. That was part of the recruiting. It was like the Manning family wanted him to sit. The Manning family wanted him to not be the guy. And so I think for Texas, Malik's going to have a longer leash than I think you're really going to see from most quarterbacks in that situation. So, I mean, if the wheels completely fall off, then yeah, you'll probably see Arch, but I think it's going to take like the bus being on fire for that to happen.
So regardless of who's playing quarterback, they're obviously going to have some really good offensive weapons, some of the best in the league. Because like you mentioned, you have Adonai Mitchell, who is one of the better wide receivers, and Xavier Worthy, who is a proven wide receiver as well. You've also got Jonathan Brooks at running back, who is filling in for Bijan Robinson. He's second behind Ollie Gordon. That came up as a bit of a surprise from Oklahoma State.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah. So what do you think the best player matchups are going forward against this K-State team? And who are you looking forward to seeing, and what's the strengths and weaknesses of this offense?
I think you hit on it. Texas has the big question was how you do replace not just Bijan Robinson, but Roschon Johnson as well. They're both RB1 for an NFL roster this year, and so how do you replace that guy? And this 3-star kid from Hallettsville, Texas, of all places, comes in and is honestly on a better pace than Bijan was a year ago when he won the Doak Walker, which is ridiculous to think about, right? His 8 games in, he's ahead of where Bijan was a year ago, and I think that's the strength. When I talked about Sark having a vision for the team coming in, he took these shots at Tom Herman that I thought were hilarious. But he made, in one of his early press conferences, he talked about how he's never seen a team with more scholarship tight ends than offensive linemen, and that was like a kind of a sneak diss at Tom Herman, which I loved because Tom Herman built that roster horribly. And so he and Kyle Flood, which I've said this before and I'll say it again, the biggest recruiting win for Sark was getting Kyle Flood away from Tuscaloosa. So he and Kyle Flood really addressed that offensive line room, brought in 2 5-star players that are now starters on that offensive line. And so I think the combination of the offensive line progression with Jonathan Brooks really taking advantage of sitting behind a generational talent and really learning. If you watch the things that Jonathan Brooks is doing now, he looks like a mini Bijan. And I say mini Bijan, they're actually like the same size. I think he would actually be a little bit bigger than Bijan, but like he looks like Bijan 2.0. And so it's been great. And so I think Texas, when you look at what Kansas State is doing on offense, I'd love to see Texas run the ball and keep Kansas State's offense on the sideline as much as they possibly can. Running quarterbacks scare me. They always have, especially Kansas State running quarterbacks. I got enough of Colin Klein in my life. And so like, it's just that to me would be what the strength of this Texas team is. They went into Tuscaloosa and there were 100,000 people knowing they're going to run the ball to end the game, and they were able to do that. So I think that's really where Texas is going to excel in most matchups this year.
Yeah, I'll never forget the Colin Klein where he completed like 7 passes maybe in that 2010 matchup toward the end of the Mac Brown era.
Still have nightmares about that.
Splitting reps with Carson Kaufman that season. That was a strange season for us. But one thing that I wanted to dig in with you on, because it's driven my wife crazy this season, it's the red zone scoring. Texas is currently 96th in the nation in red zone scoring, but that's improved from it. At one point was like 120th or something like that. Only scoring 78.79% of the time that the Longhorns make it to the red zone. What do you think from your perspective has led to some of the red zone scoring woes? And how much of a difference does it really make in the grand scheme of things when you're winning the games that you have won against the quality of opponents that you have?
I want to answer the second part first. I think that's like the crux for it. I go back to the OU game, right? And one of the biggest sequences in that game is Jordan Whittington gets tackled on the 1 rather than scoring a touchdown. OU stonewalls him 4 times at the 1 yard line. It's a 4-point game, right? So that to me, it's a massive difference, and especially in a league like the Big 12, trading 3s for 7s gets you beat every time. And so it's a massive, massive issue. And you mentioned the red zone scoring. I think the red zone touchdown percentage is even worse. I think I looked it up and they're like 120th. They're like bottom 15, I think, in red zone touchdown percentage, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But I think it's a mix of play calling, and I think it's a mix of execution. I know it's like hedging my bets a little bit, but I think Sark gets kind of stubborn sometimes. He's a really smart guy. He's a very he is Texas hired him because he's an offensive guy. He's an offensive mind. He's one of the better offensive minds in the game right now. And I think he buys his own brand too much. He's like, this should be working. This should be working. This should be working. And so he pounds his head into a wall probably one too many times. And then on like a 4th down, like again, I go back to OU, right? They run basically the same play 3 times. He gets stonewalled. And then the play that they probably should have run on 3rd down, a little quick out to Xavier Worthy, runs it on 4th down, gets stopped at the 1, right? So I think part of it is him getting too into his own bag and getting into his own head. And then I think there's an execution and a toughness thing that goes as well. You've got your 300-pound, 320-pound defensive lineman in there playing fullback, and he gets stood up by a safety. Like, that's just a toughness issue, right? Like, that's just you not being the tougher man on that down, and you get beat. And those are the types of things that, Texas that's been emblematic of Texas in years past. And I think some of that has fallen by the wayside. I think, you look at the Houston game, they would have lost that game 2 years ago. And so I think some of that has gone by the wayside, but I think you still see some vestiges of that, like old, we're just not quite as tough as we need to be in those spots. And so I think that is really like the biggest red flag of them all.
Sark had a line in his press conference today. It kind of just goes with what you just said, where he says they didn't hire the book. They hired me, because like talking about if he goes with analytics or his gut. And like with what you just said with the red zone, that kind of, I don't know. Like is that not him taking any outside, input or what?
Yeah. I mean, I think some of it is his instincts. And I think he's been pretty transparent with some of it. I think he said after it happened again, I think in Houston, where they struggled to score in the red zone. And he said, like, some of that's on me. And I think that's, I'm glad when coaches take accountability. One of the things I really appreciate about Sark is that he's generally pretty self-aware. If you look into his past and the things he's gone through, his battle with addiction and all of that, like generally people that have gone through stuff like that are pretty self-aware. And I think Sark is pretty emblematic of that. And so, part of it is, I think him, again, he's right. One of the reasons why Texas hired him is because he was the architect of that Alabama national championship offense. They got a wide receiver, the Heisman, right? Like that's part of why Texas hired him. And so you don't hire a guy like that to not trust his instincts to not have him calling plays. But I think at some point there needs to be somebody on the staff. Maybe it's AJ Milwee, who he brought with him from Alabama. Milwee was kind of his like quarterback QA guy. And so now Milwee's the quarterback coach at Texas. So if it's not AJ Milwee, if it's not Pete Kwiatkowski, if it's not Kyle Flood, somebody's got to kind of get in his ear and be like, hey, like we need to do something different, especially in those red zone situations.
So Texas has some of the most surprising red zone stats that I've seen, because on the defensive side of the ball, they're ranked third in red zone scoring, allowing the opponents to score at 68%. I didn't realize that until I was looking at the show rundown. So with a pretty well-balanced team on the offensive side and defensive side, you're 8th in the nation for points per game at 116 and 23rd in yards per game at 328. So again, on this side of the ball, what tools is Texas going to use for success on the defensive side? What are the strengths and weaknesses with this K-State matchup?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I'm terrified of this game. Purple teams terrify me. Kansas State, TCU, Purple, Washington last year in the Alamo Bowl, purple teams terrify me. And I think one of the reasons why I'm not like completely shaking right now is because, Kansas State is going to run the ball. That's kind of what Kansas State has been built on and done it successfully. But Texas's run defense is one of the best that's out there. They struggled a bit with Dylan Gabriel's legs, which worries me a bit going into this matchup, running quarterbacks and things like that. But when you've got two defensive tackles that are going to be drafted on the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, things go well for your run defense. Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy are 2 legitimate NFL defensive tackles. You've got NFL guys on Twitter talking about them all the time. If you're on NFL draft Twitter, you've seen those names before. And so having those 2 in the center of your defense is a big deal. Jalen Ford is, playing behind them, really takes advantage of the fact that he's got those 2 massive keisters to hide behind and make some plays there. Anthony Hill is a 5-star linebacker. He's a local kid out of Denton Ryan. I say local, he's from Dallas. But he, like, freshmen shouldn't be that good, but he's like every bit of 5-star. Like, he's a guy who's really flashed quite a bit. And then the unsung hero on the defense, and I'm going to bang this drum as much as I can. Jahdae Barron is the guy that you're going to need to watch in this game because as much as I've ever seen a defensive back set the edge, that guy does. Like, he is the nickelback of all nickelbacks. He's gritty. He's mean. He slips blocks. He's not afraid of contact. Like, if I wasn't done having kids, my next kid would be named Jahdae. I just love that kid so much. Like, he's incredible. And so, like, he's a guy to watch. I think the matchups that scare me is really like the back end of Texas's defense. They've been banged up at safety. Jalen Catalon came in from Arkansas with an injury history, and shockingly, he got injured again. So Texas has been banged up at safety quite a bit, and Houston really took advantage of that. Houston played the classic air raid, like have my inside guy just find some space behind the linebackers in front of the safeties, and just sit down and grass. And so, like, that worries me. The Texas safeties have not been good. I don't know why Texas can't recruit safeties. The state puts out some solid safeties, but again, none of them end up wanting to go to Texas for some reason. So that's the one area of the defense that really worries me is like the secondary is not only injured, they're just not playing as well as they should.
That's tough. And that kind of leads into one of our listener questions right here. If it is me, yes, this is my question. Listener questions from Bob's wife, of all people. Shout out to Bob's wife. I mean,
Mrs. Trollsby.
Yeah, I mean, she's kind of, she's Twitter famous. It's me, Alice. She asks about the 2-minute drill defense. She says, quote, defense looks like they're playing prevent/soft. I don't like throwing that S word around too much, but that's from their side. I don't know. Into the OU game, and what does that say? And second and fourth quarters of Houston. Opinions on being more aggressive there on the defensive side.
Yeah, I think your wife has some astute analysis there, Bob. I think one of the things I love about Kyle Flood is also one of the things that frustrates me about Kyle Flood is like he's really interested in like once Texas has a multiple score lead, 14, 21 points, he's not going to take a ton of risks. So the defenders are going to play a little softer. They're not going to play as much press. He's not going to be as aggressive as he could be. And he really relies on his front seven to create some pressure on the quarterback. The problem is when the front seven can't create pressure on the quarterback, then your defenders are left on an island, right? The quarterback has 5, 7, 10 seconds to throw a ball. And regardless of how good your defensive backs are, you give a quarterback 7 seconds to throw a ball, he's going to find somebody open. And so that was the case against OU, the drive where they went down and scored the go-ahead touchdown. They were playing prevent. Like, you're playing a team that needs to score to kick a field goal to win the game. Why are you playing prevent? Like, why are you letting them get? And so I was screaming at the TV, and Pete Kwiatkowski has forgotten more about football than I will ever know. Like, I get that, but like, it's pretty plain to see from a lot of folks that like it wasn't getting the job done. Texas had really had some success dialing up pressure against Dillon Gabriel. I think part of the problem in that game specifically was Dillon Gabriel was using his legs more than he had ever used them in his entire OU career. And so they weren't necessarily prepared for that, and they didn't really adjust as well. Anthony Hill, aforementioned freshman, struggled on his shadow responsibilities in that game. And so that was, I think, part of it. But I think she's absolutely right. I would love to see Texas get more aggressive. I think I would love to see they've got NFL quality cornerbacks. They've got guys that I think are going to be at least have a cup of coffee in the NFL at cornerback. And so, play press coverage, like get up on somebody's body, really put a hat on somebody and see if you can, if they beat you one-on-one in press coverage, it happens, right? But play aggressively. I'd rather lose aggressive than lose passively.
Could not agree more. Allison, you've got the next question, also from my wife.
Sorry, pulling it up real quick.
You're good. You're good.
Okay, so Bob's wife also asked, more concerned about Will Howard or Avery Johnson based on the running threat. Gabriel ran all over us meaning Texas.
Yeah. Avery Johnson worries me. And like, I don't know how else to say this. Like, Dillon Gabriel's feet are the reason why OU won that game, like period, point blank. And so I think, when I think about the winning recipe against Texas, the way that OU schemed it up, and this is the only time you're ever going to hear me praise anybody from the Bryles family, but like Jeff Lebby had the perfect game plan. Like I cannot stand any member of the Bryles clan, but like Jeff Lebby schemed that up perfectly, right? The best way to take away the aggressiveness of a defense that's aggressive and attacking is to run QB draw. And that's what he did. He ran a lot of QB draw. Dillon Gabriel, let the defenders go past him and then ran for 15 yards a clip. And so, that like Avery Johnson terrifies me, and it hurts me because I grew up a Spurs fan and Avery Johnson's one of my favorite players of all time. So like having like that be a fear of mine is something that I'm unfamiliar with. But I think for me, that's the big worry. It's like Avery Johnson can move, he can book. Jason Bean had some incredible plays against OU, had some incredible plays against Texas a few weeks ago. And so I think Texas has shown that they're susceptible to those quarterbacks that can catch an edge. And really, I call them guys that are faster than geometry, right? You might have a good angle, but they're just going to outrun you. And I think Avery Johnson's one of those guys.
I like faster than geometry.
I would love for Avery Johnson to have Avery Johnson's accent. That would be awesome. That would be the coolest thing ever.
I love it.
So moving on to the next question, once again from my wife, @itme_Alice. What's the deal with some of Sark's decision-making on fourth down? It seemed to be a major mistake in the OU game, and the second time that it handed all the game momentum to Houston when you were up by multiple scores on them. Situations where you're maybe in the red zone, maybe you're not in the red zone, but you're going for it on fourth down. I guess just what's your take on some of the play calling and choices that are being made there on fourth down?
So I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth for a second, because I don't necessarily hate going for it in those spots, right? I don't hate going for it on fourth downs in those spots, because if you get the fourth down against OU, things are going right for you. If you get the fourth down against Houston, you probably go up 4 scores and things go pretty heavily in your direction. I like going for it on fourth down. I hate taking the ball out of your quarterback's hands. Fake punts, fake field goals. Very rarely do I like those. Like, they're fun plays. They're exciting to watch when they pull it off. But like, when you have Bert Auburn is the kicker's name, right? When Bert Auburn is your guy running for 5 yards, when you have Jonathan Brooks who's averaging 6 freaking yards a carry, right? Just like line it up and run it. Like I'd rather, again, it's overthinking. It's trying to get too cute. It's trying to do too much when, like sometimes there's a reason why practical things are practical. There's a reason why pragmatism rules in a lot of ways. It's like, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, that's like the whole point of Game of Thrones, right? Just be pragmatic and things are going to go well. And so like, that is how I feel about the offense, right? I like being aggressive on fourth downs. I love it. That's kind of the wave of the future and how football is, but like, why take the ball out of your offense's hands when both of your running backs are averaging 6 a carry and you need 5 yards? Just put it in their hands and see what happens.
Is it me? It's me.
It's you.
It's me.
I'm the problem. It's me.
Oh, don't get me started on Taylor. Let's keep it okay. Well, now we're going back to Malik. That's my aesthetically he's aesthetically like my quarterback. Like if we're just throwing that out there, dreads out of control. And he's humongous. But Bob's wife, he's just a beast. I'm surprised he's not a runner. Like
you and everybody else.
I'm shocked. When they said he's not a runner, I'm like, are you sure we're talking about the same person? No. But Bob's wife wants to know, based on Malik's first showing as a starter, did you like that they went with him going pass heavy to start and more so close the game with the run, or would you like to see more of a balanced approach to start the game?
There's something to be said about getting your young quarterback in rhythm and getting their confidence going early, right? And I think that's why Sark went that way. Again, but I think it's part of Sark not being able to get out of his own head or kind of get away from his initial thinking, right? Like, okay, so the guy goes 3 of 8, throws a pick to start the game, right? Maybe pivot a little bit, maybe hand the ball off to Jonathan Brooks, who, and this is going to be a slight to BYU because their run defense is not that great, right? So like, if things are going sideways, the worst possible scenario for you is to have to like a quarterback who struggles and you're down a score or you're down 10 points, right? So I like the idea of getting a young quarterback in his first start to get the confidence going, to get the swag going, because part of like one of the biggest like feathers in Malik Murphy's cap, I couldn't come up with a better metaphor, but like one of the biggest things that people say about him is just like his confidence, the excitement, the electricity he brings. Like he's just one of those guys that people want to follow. And so getting him to that mode and getting him to that mindset is important. But again, Sark, they were struggling. So I was screaming on Twitter to like run the damn ball. But I think it worked out well. Like I said, he closed 13 of 18 for 150 and 2 scores. So like, I guess maybe Sark knows better than I do. I don't know.
So I've got an odd one for you.
Love it.
Says
this is beyond odd. This is the oddest of odds.
This is my jam. I love it.
I don't even totally understand it. I think I know where he's going with this, but this is from Hazen Short. The preferences. This is obviously a bit, but can you rank the 5 yell leaders by 1, cutest face, 2, best form, and 3, most firm?
So I'm assuming he's going with the A&M yell leaders, the milkmen. I could just go on a rant on how weird A&M is. My best friend's an Aggie.
Please do.
But like they're prescriptive ways to they call it wildcatting, which is one of the things that the yell leaders do that you commonly called whooping. If you go to their traditions website, you guys know it, right? But there's a specific way you have to hold your hands based on your year, right? You have to cover up your ring finger. If you're an underclassman, you can't fully say whoop. I think freshmen have to say yeah, and then sophomores say yeah. Juniors say and then finally when you get your ring in your senior, you get to finally fully whoop. And so it's just for those that like love it, like again, my best friend on the face of the planet, we've been friends since the 4th grade, so like, and he knows how I feel about this. I give him grief as often as I can. Like it's just so freaking weird. Like, it is the weirdest thing in the world. And like, I have friends that were in the Corps, and I could tell you all sorts of weird, gross things about the Corps and how they have to, like, if somebody hears you peeing too late at night, you get in trouble. And if Reveille jumps on your bed, she's got your bed for the night. Like, it's just all sorts of dumb things that happen in College Station. And again, they're going to be 7-5 this year, so good on them.
I love it. I could talk shit on A&M and clown on them all day because I lived in Austin,
Love it.
married a Longhorn, and we have a lot of friends who are Aggies, and they are the most insufferable fan base probably in all of college football. And there are a lot of really insufferable fan bases out there. But you
I
got
come from one.
I mean, you've got the good ag. You've got, I don't know. They're just super freaking weird. And you did answer this question on Twitter, but this one came from Philip Slavin from the 1012 Podcast Network, which you are a part of for, I guess, however long you're still in the Big 12. But which anime characters correspond to Longhorn coaches? Sark, Mac Brown, Charlie Strong, and Tom Herman.
So I appreciate Philip giving me this one. Philip knows how nerdy I am. I think I gave Philip a free couple of months of Crunchyroll so he could get caught up. So yeah, check out my Twitter at GH Goodridge. I answered this one already, but if you're not an anime fan, this is all that's going to go over your head. So I have Sark as Lemillion from My Hero Academia. So Lemillion was a big, bright star, had a downfall, wasn't all his fault. Things got to him, chemical substances got to him. And he's having to like build himself back up. Too early to tell if he's going to get to the heights that everyone wants him to be. But still likable guy, very charismatic. We got Mac Brown as Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. It is an anime, even though it's made in America. Fight me. But like, it makes perfect sense. Like, he was like, Uncle Iroh was the dragon of the West, right? Like, everybody feared him. He was a badass. And then things in life went weird and kind of changed him and softened him. And now he's this kind of sage old character, but he's still there for like one last go round. I think that's what North Carolina is. Tom Herman's Mr. Satan from Dragon Ball Z, bought his own hype, not really ever lived up to it, kind of, stolen valor kind of situation. He had one good year and then kind of rode on that to get a massive buyout. Also kind of a skis if you read the right tea leaves around places. And then Charlie Strong was Yamcha because that dude got blown up.
I went Charlie Strong Killa from Dragon Ball Z. Just
same vibe.
Just absolute stud. I mean, aesthetically, we're talking.
Yeah. I love it.
Kind of like Malik Murphy is for you.
I mean, I can go on a whole. There's a lot of them on Texas. I mean, Kelvin Banks, that dude is a golly boy. They don't build them like that. It's just
I could do an hour on Kelvin Banks.
They look like created characters. It's not fair, really.
There's no reason for Kelvin Banks to be that good. Like, there's no reason a 20-year-old should be one of the best tackles in the conference. There's no freaking way. There's no reason. The guy. I like to troll as many fans as I can, but like when the cat from FAU, I can't ever say his name. He won Big
Felix
12
Anudike Uzama.
Yeah, him, right? At any time a Big 12 player would get some sort of award that Kelvin Banks locked down, I tweet how many sacks they had against him, which I think FAU was the only one that had a full sack against Kelvin Banks last year as a true freshman.
I don't remember that sack, but dude, Kelvin Banks is an absolute beast. Monster.
All right. So if that's the end of the listener questions, then let's get a little bit sentimental here.
Okay.
So what's it like this season, playing your last season in the Big 12, knowing that you're not going to see a lot of these teams, especially the teams within Texas? What's it like just having your last matchup against them?
It's like, it hasn't really fully set in yet. I don't think. I think it's one of those like, I'm a big metaphor person. It's like when you're moving at the end of the school year, so you kind of just try to ignore it and like live a normal life, or like your best friend is moving and you try to ignore it, just kind of live a normal life. And then like on the last day of school, you pick a fight with somebody to like, oh, I never liked them anyways. Like, I feel like that's what it's going to be like. It's just where like, as soon as the last, whatever, the Big 12 baseball tournament, I'm going to cuss somebody out and we're going to call it good. Like, I never liked them anyways. They all sucked. my formative memories watching college football are watching Big 12 games, right? Like the reason I went to the University of Texas was watching Derek Johnson, terrorize Big 12 defenses. I love watching that guy play. Kansas City fans really vibing with that. He was one of my all-time favorites. And so I think like it's bittersweet. I think sadly, this is kind of what college football is and is going to be for the foreseeable future. I do think, long term, it's not a sustainable model. And I think we'll probably end back up regionally, asking a volleyball team to fly across the country, asking Stanford to go play a volleyball game on the ACC is probably not going to be a sustainable model for the foreseeable future. So I think eventually we'll probably end back up here, but it's, like I said, it's bittersweet. A lot of my formative memories around college football, going, tailgating before Kansas State game, they weren't always fun for me to watch, but, I was at the Michael Crabtree game. Like that one sucked, but like, being, now I'm 37, so I can look back and be like, that was an awesome game to be at live, even though, I damn near got trampled as folks rushed the field. Right. I was at the Cedric Benson, Vince Young comeback against Oklahoma State. Like these are formative memories for me. And so, yeah, it sucks. And, it sucks that TV money is kind of taking away some of the things that make college football really great. But I think we'll enjoy it while it lasts and see what this next season looks like.
And then I do have a quick question. So outside looking in, or I guess inside looking in, but outside looking in here in a few months, what do you think of what the Big 12 did to add those teams from out west? And will you continue to watch the Big 12 in football and basketball, knowing that the product's going to be different without Texas being part of it?
I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Big 12 is and will continue to be the best basketball conference in the country. Like bump the ACC, bump the Big 10. Big 12 basketball is rules all. And so I think there's something to be said about like quality over quantity at some point. And so I think, the Big 12, the arms race for conference realignment made some strange bedfellows. And I think, getting Colorado back is weird, but it works. And I think, I guess it's better than like a West Coast, like a fully West Coast team. Like Mountain Time isn't too far off. Adding more teams in Texas, I think adding the teams that they have, it makes it a viable product. I think for football, I think what really made the Big 12 for the long time was not the top end. It wasn't OU. It wasn't Texas when Texas was good. It was all the other teams in the middle. It was watching Oklahoma State, Texas Tech 85-80 game, right? Like that, just throwing out random numbers there, right? That's what made the Big 12. That's what made the brand of the Big 12. And so I think the additions that they've made are kind of not like they're like the spiritual Big 12 type teams. It's going to be fun. It's going to be weird. It's going to be high scoring. It's going to be, that's a random ass matchup. So I think it's going to be fun. And again, I'm a college football junkie, but I think, I like their Big 12 teams that I like to follow. I like Kansas State outside of like the times where you guys have ruined my dreams. So like I will continue to watch Kansas State. I'll continue to, cheer against Texas Tech and, want everybody to beat them. So I'll still be invested.
So
go ahead, Chad.
I was just going to say, going forward for Texas, you got A&M and you're going to be saddled with that tumor OU on your back forever. Who else are you looking forward to? Obviously you got I think they're getting rid of divisions, but you're going to see LSU more often. You're going to see all these other teams. Arkansas. Yeah, that's history too. Southwest Conference. But who else? Who else are you looking forward to?
If Bob hadn't said Arkansas was going to be my answer. Like the last time Texas went to Fayetteville, it was embarrassing, and Texas needs to get that back in blood for sure. Like getting to of all the conferences that expanded, I think the SEC did the one that makes the most sense because it's still pretty regional, right? Like Stanford being in the Atlantic Coast Conference doesn't make any sense, but OU and Texas being in the Southwest Conference Southeast Conference makes more sense. And so just being able to play Georgia every couple of years, or being able to have Ole Miss come to town every now and again, have one of the Mannings on the sideline with a Manning playing in the game is going to be really cool to see. And so there's a lot of historic brands now in the SEC. And so Arkansas is the one that I really want to see. I think Texas has to bludgeon them the next time things go together. But I think it's Like I said already, I think of all of the like conference realignment things, the SEC makes the most sense. I still don't love like breaking up the Big 12, but we can blame a lot of other people for that. A&M decided to run several years ago. Nebraska did it too, so we can blame them. But like it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be interesting again. And getting it's going to be harder for me to get tickets. I live in San Antonio, so I was able to like rock up for the Wyoming game in a non-conference, but the prices are going up, and I don't love that particularly.
Well, I guess to the last question, if you're going to be watching the Big 12, I'm really excited for whenever that first Iowa State, Arizona State matchup happens. If we're just talking about random matchups between random teams, but Gerald, it was awesome having you on. I want to be respectful of your time as you got to get out of here, but give us your score prediction, plug whatever you want to before you go, and we'll get wrapped up here.
Yeah, score prediction. I'm terrible at score predictions. I don't bet. I lost all my lunch money once in high school and haven't bet since. But I think like if I have to make a prediction, I think it's honestly going to be more low scoring. I think both teams are probably going to prioritize running the ball. So I could see this being like a 31-21 situation. Like I think like that, like I want to say Texas, but I also like have PTSD from picking Texas and not. But like I picked Texas every game this year, and so I'm 7-1 on my picks, and so I'm just gonna ride the hot hand, and I'll say I think Texas 31-21.
All right, go ahead and plug whatever you want, and we'll get out of here.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. I'm at GH Goodridge. I tweet like about random nerd stuff and my kids. Like I'm coaching my kids' flag football team, and kids are goofy and hilarious. So I tweet about that on my personal Twitter. And then our podcast is at Longhorn Pod. We don't take ourselves too seriously. So like if you're in there for like, we'll troll OU fans, we'll troll Texas Tech fans, and then we like trolling ourselves. We hype up a lot of women's sports. We're big women's sports fans. My co-host Kyle and I, my first job ever was covering Texas volleyball. His first job ever was covering Texas soccer, and they're both two women's programs that are pretty incredible. So we love talking about women's athletics on our Twitter and on our podcast. So check us out. The Longhorn Republic, we go on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So check us out.
Awesome. Gerald, it was awesome having you on. Appreciate that. Go ahead, if you're listening, if you're a Texas fan, follow him. If you're not a Texas fan, follow him and stay tuned with everything they've got going on over there. But for all of us here at Cocaine Willie, thanks a ton for listening to the show on your podcast feeds or watching us on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also follow the show on Twitter or Instagram or follow us individually. I am at Bob Trollsby. Our guest co-host tonight is at Allison_Renner, Allison with 1 L. Fireball Matt is at Matt Marchesini, and Chef is at Chef Andre Napier. Chef.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug, baby.
We are all coke and no joke. Wildcat country.
Let's freaking ride, baby.
Let's go.